Well, today we focus on housing. Nearly $50 billion is what the federal government spends every year to help low-income individuals and families get access to affordable rentals. There are more than 11 million low-income households considered severely rent-burdened. That means those folks spend more than half of their income on rent, and without federal assistance, they're facing an uncertain future and often homelessness. This week, NPR teamed up with PBS's Frontline for a joint investigation into the nation's affordable housing crisis. Their investigation found that two key federal programs created to help those in need, Section 8 vouchers for renters and the low-income housing tax credit for developers, left unchecked, may be doing more harm than good. I spoke with NPR News investigative correspondent Laura Sullivan to hear more about their findings. But first, let's take a look at a clip from Frontline's piece. It was called Poverty, Politics, and Profit.
In Dallas and elsewhere, we kept hearing how the largest of the programs, Section 8 vouchers, covers just a fraction of those in need.
Section 8 applications. Thousands of residents have been fighting for a chance to get public housing assistance.
When the vouchers are handed out, the response is overwhelming.
Chaos this morning in the parking lot as tempers flared over the city's plan to hand out the Section 8 applications.
Some people been here since Sunday morning, Monday morning. It's ridiculous.
The voucher pays the difference between the monthly rent and what renters can afford. More than 2 million households use them, but wait lists can be years long.
Well, how big a deal is it to get a Section 8 voucher?
Only 1 in every 4 households that are eligible for and in need of housing assistance get it.
It was a dangerous scene. Thousands of people hoping for Section 8 vouchers ran for a spot in line.
They're hoping to win what is essentially a housing lottery. So it's the 25% who have the vouchers that are the lucky ones within this kind of a system.
And for more on their findings, joining me now via Skype is NPR News investigative correspondent Laura Sullivan. Laura, thank you so much for joining us. Great to see you.
Thanks so much for having me.
Congratulations on such an amazing piece. It's provocative, it's thought-provoking, it's informative, educational, it's maddening at some points of the piece. What made you decide that you wanted to investigate this money trail into the low-income housing tax credit? And you may want to explain to people what that is to begin with.
Right. Well, we started off on this project when we took a look at some of the numbers, which showed that there were, 11 million people that were struggling a step away from homelessness, that were having a hard time paying for rent. We were looking at the number of evictions across the country, 2.5 million people every year, the number of homeless across the country. And we were wondering why, if we're spending $50 billion a year in programs, in taxpayer money to help people, why so few people were getting help. And only 1 in 4 of the people that need help out there right now are actually getting any. So we wanted to figure out what was going on in some of these government programs. One of the ones we looked at was the low-income housing tax credit, and that was problematic.
And you went into Dallas, you came to Miami. Tell us why you decided to look into those 2 areas.
Dallas is a very interesting market because it's a high rent market. In a lot of cities across the country, the rents are very high, and it's very hard for these programs to work for people. Section 8 vouchers are very difficult to use, and it's very difficult to build some of these low-income housing tax credit projects in these markets. Miami is another one of these markets where it's very difficult to find housing. It's very difficult for people to afford the housing that is there. In Miami, we ended up on the trail of what turned out to be 3 large developers who were charged with fraud, with stealing from a federal taxpayer program. And we were looking at where some of that money went and how that had happened so easily.
Yeah, and I think one of those developers was Mike Cox, who you talked to, who developed La Brea, which was such a great building. I think 90 former homeless tenants,
yes, largely formerly homeless,
were now living there. It seemed like a beautiful building with lots of great amenities for them. And Mike turned out to look like, or appear to be, just as the folks you talked to in Dallas, almost like a hero. As a viewer, you're rooting for him and you're saying, wow, this is great. And then the tables are turned and you find out that he was stealing money, if you will, from the program. And that was such a poignant part of the piece, when he really almost hangs his head in shame. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, he's a really sort of remarkable and interesting character in this story because he started off really as a true believer in helping the poor, helping this issue of affordable housing for the poor. And he spent, years working for nonprofits trying to address this issue. And then he partnered up with a developer, and almost overnight, his development company and the developer's development company came together, and they were making millions of dollars legally, as the program is set up to do. But then his partners came up with a kickback scheme, and they devised this scheme. Michael Cox caught on to it, and he did not go to the authorities. He did not turn them in. He was eventually convinced to go along with the scheme, and he did for years. And together, this scheme stole $34 million from 14 taxpayer-paid-for tax credit projects.
Yeah, it was really amazing. But he's still trying to do good, is he not? He's still trying to work within the program. He's paying his dues for what he did, but he's still involved.
Yes, he is very penitent about this situation. He ended up cooperating with prosecutors. He gave himself up right away. He never, interestingly, he never spent any of the money that he stole. He sort of just kept it, so he was able to return all of it. And he's now, he got probation. His partners ended up getting prison sentences. So he's now returned to his roots, working for nonprofits, and again, helping to advocate for the poor. So as the assistant U.S. attorney said, this is a moment in his life where good people do bad things.
Well, and talking about the U.S. Attorney Michael Sherwin, who you speak to a lot in the piece, he also called this a program of trust. Address that for a moment, because there's really not a lot of oversight here. We discovered that through your reporting.
Yes, Assistant U.S. Attorney Michael Sherwin said that it's up to the states, it's up to these housing agencies that all the states have to monitor this program and make sure that they know where all of these hundreds of millions of dollars are going every year. And that he was saying these state housing agencies are not up to the task to do this. They're outmatched, they're underfunded, they don't have the kind of expertise or access to the books that they need to make sure that fraud isn't happening. And because of that, Sherwin said that he believes that fraud could very well be happening elsewhere, and that there's just not enough oversight over how this money is being spent.
And quickly, because we have to go, tell us a little bit about those 3 women who were struggling to make ends meet, who you feature in your piece. Where are they now?
We followed all 3 of these women who wanted so desperately to use their vouchers to get into a better life, to get into a better neighborhood, and it did not work out for any of them.
Oh, it's heart-wrenching. Again, a great piece. Laura, thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate you taking the time to talk about your work. Congratulations.
Thank you so much for having me.
And to check out the NPR Frontline investigation called Poverty, Politics, and Profit, you can watch it by going to pbs.org/frontline. We'll also have a link for you on our Facebook page. Again, a thought-provoking piece on Frontline. You want to check it out. And joining me now for a local reaction and to discuss possible solutions to the affordable housing crisis is Yan-Mei Lee, Associate Professor at Florida Atlantic University's School of Urban and Regional Planning, and attorney Sharzad Imami, Advocacy Director of the Affordable Housing and Community Economic Development Unit at Legal Services of Greater Miami. Thank you both for being here.
Thank you for having me.
I know that both of you saw that piece. So Yan-Mei, let me start with you. What is the most pressing problem, because you've studied this at length, when it comes to affordable housing and the crisis going on here in South Florida?
I think the Frontline and the NPR report actually revealed something that we have not found before, the legal challenges of low-income housing tax credit program. But I think the major challenge here is the lack of funding, and also the long waiting list. Like, for example, the Section 8 voucher program usually takes 4 to 5 years for somebody to get the voucher. And also the low-income housing tax credit programs may not also meet the needs of people who actually do not have the income lower than certain levels. So I think those are the major challenges. And also because of foreclosure, I did a lot of research in foreclosures during the recession. The foreclosure crisis actually put a lot of people in the market to search for the rental housing. That actually put a lot of burden in the rents. So that's why the rents actually keep rising, but people's real income is not. And that actually creates problems as well.
So Shahrzad, let's talk about that very issue, because that's something that you deal with in your work, right?
Correct.
Yeah, so tell us a little bit about all of that. And just that rental pool, it's just there's too many people and not enough rentals, prices going up.
Correct.
It's a big issue.
Well, in Miami-Dade County, especially within the city of Miami, we find that in a lot of neighborhoods, almost 80% or more of the residents are renters.
Wow.
And these are in neighborhoods that are the lowest income neighborhoods. So it's almost a double whammy. You have a situation where people are trying to get more and more rental housing at a cost that they can afford. And in Miami-Dade County, the area median income is only $46,000 a year. So what that means is, to be considered affordable, you are to pay no more than 30% of your income on the housing cost. And if you see some of the rents that are being charged across Miami-Dade County, it's not just unaffordable for those that are at the lowest end of the affordability spectrum, those that are making less than 30% of AMI. But we're finding that properties are not affordable for those all the way up to 120% of area median income. So it's a huge problem, especially considering that our population base is in the service and working class industries. So the wages, even if you have someone that is working 1, 2, 3 jobs, if you look at a single mom that's trying to support her 2 children, for example, on these low-wage service sector jobs, there really is virtually no place for her family to live.
And talk about what that family looks like for a moment. We actually had the folks from United Way on here. We did a show on the Alice Report, that assisted living, income constrained and employed. So folks who, a lot of them college educated, they have jobs, but their starting salaries are really low and they're struggling. So talk about what those folks look like, because some people think, well, it's the very poor, but it's not necessarily, is it?
It's not. For example, many of my colleagues that I graduated from law school with, their first jobs were very low-paying jobs, and they could not find places to live. So when the naysayers come out and they say, what are you talking about? We don't need affordable housing, or we don't want those kind of people in our community. When they're saying things like that, what they're really saying is, okay, we don't want college educated graduates or people with degrees that are trying to make our society better and have jobs. It's just that they aren't able to make enough money to afford the housing.
Yeah, and the Frontline piece talks a little bit about that in Dallas, where you had to have those letters of support because there were people in nice communities, if you will, affluent communities, who didn't want units built that had Section 8 units within them. So it becomes a problem, and people are trying to move out of certain areas and into better areas, if you will, so that the kids can go to better schools and they have access to their jobs, et cetera, correct?
Right, and we also know, especially in Miami-Dade County, we're a service industry.
Yeah.
And because of that, we need a cross-section of all socioeconomic groups in our communities in order to make them thrive and work. So
to be more diverse.
Correct.
Yeah.
You need to have individuals that are working in service sector jobs, in working sector jobs, in the construction industry, in the transportation industry, all the way up to people that are professionals.
To support one another. Yami, let's talk about your work in Monroe County specifically, because that's a whole different ball of wax, right?
Yeah, it is.
Yeah. So what's going on in Monroe County? Because there's a huge housing affordability crisis down there in the Keys.
Yeah, it is. It has a lot of issues because a lot of lower income, like service workers, because it's mainly the economy is based on tourism. So that means there are a lot of service workers. They cannot afford to live there, especially the Key West and some other keys. And they have to commute. They have to live in either trailer homes or the downstairs enclosures, which are illegal. They actually the county tried to crack down those downstairs enclosures because they enclosed the downstairs because the housing in the Keys, usually they need to be elevated. So
First possible storm surge, flooding,
right.
et
Some
cetera, right.
homeowners just enclose those downstairs, and they rent those downstairs enclosures to like low-income workers.
Is there a crackdown on that, though?
They were trying to crack down on that, but I have not followed up on that, so I'm not sure. And also, actually, there's a book called Nickel and Dime, and the author pretended to be a waitress in a restaurant in Key West, and he mentioned about how difficult it is to, find a housing in the Keys. And she had to commute, and she had to share like trailer homes with other people and stuff.
It's a big problem.
It is.
So, Shahrzad, what's the solution here?
Well,
Where do we go from here?
We're so far behind at this point that we really have to take a multifaceted approach to this problem. I think we have to find a way to make the cost of land more affordable. How do we do that? Governments have land that they own. They could donate that land to nonprofits that want to build or have community facilities for affordable housing. We need to have more public-private partnerships. The other thing that is a problem is the cost of construction. It is very high. We need to maybe look into alternative building materials, steel frame homes, shipping containers, try to think outside the box for how we can keep construction costs down. If the cost of building the housing is so high, there is no way that you can restrict the rents, because the rents will not cover the operational costs of the property. The other thing that we can do is, of course, the easiest answer is to have additional funding. But in the age that we're in right now, we don't know if that's going to be possible with our federal government proposing to cut many of the affordable housing funding programs.
It's multifaceted.
Correct.
An issue that continues. Ladies, thank you so very much for joining us. I wanted to reiterate that Alice is asset limited, income constrained, employed. Obviously, it's a topic we're going to continue to talk about. So thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
Really appreciate it. And do you have a personal story that you'd like to share about affordable housing in South Florida? We want to hear from you. You can reach us on Twitter and on Facebook at YourSouthFL. Post a video or a comment about your experience. And while you're there, tell us what other issues matter most to you. Remember, we want your take on things. We look forward to hearing from you.